Today's species spotlight is on one of the more unusual species of snake, and even then so, it's even more unusual as it's an arboreal species. Today we are talking about Candoia bibroni. Now, before we get too far into it, just want to give a big shout out to my good friends at Beastie's Pet Store. They are a specialty brick and mortar reptile shop in Pueblo, Colorado. They have a bunch of kind of the usual exotic fare, as well as tons of very unusual and oddball species, and very knowledgeable about them as well. So got to take a trip over there and get some good footage of a couple different species. So big shout out to them, just like 310 Exotics and Braden Exotics that have used let me use some of their animals for these species spotlight videos. So thank you again so much, Beasties. Now back to Candoia bibroni. Now, you may have heard me talk about Candoia before if you're some of my longtime viewers. Candoia is a genus of old world, relatively small boid or boa species. Primarily, they're found in a lot of the islands and archipelagos found throughout Polynesia and like the Solomon Islands, New Caledonia, Samoa, Fiji. Those are those type of islands. The most famous of the entire genus is the viper boa that we've done a whole species spotlight. I'll try to remember to put a link for it right here. You can go check that out, or you can check out the whole species spotlight playlist at any point as well. You should absolutely go do that as well. But the bibroni is actually the largest species of the entire genus. These guys are typically found in some of the Solomon Islands, American Samoa, Fiji, some of New Caledonia. These guys are a very unusual looking one. There are two different subspecies in there, and they have a lot of really weird common names. The first one, the dominant species, bibroni, is the Fiji island boa, the Pacific island boa, the bibroni beveled headed boa, the keeled scaled boa, and then the australis, the other of the two, is usually just referred to as the Solomon Island tree boa. Now, when I say that this is the largest of the genus, they typically, being sexually dimorphic, females hitting about 5 to 5.5 feet long. So much smaller than a lot of people think when it comes to boas. Heck, even the Amazon tree boas can get over 6 feet long. They're just usually are pretty thin, just like the bibronis as well, or the Solomon Island tree boas or Pacific, whatever. You get what I mean, right? Males typically are much smaller, usually not exceeding more than about 3.5 to maybe 4 feet long, and usually much thinner. Now, these guys are highly unusual if you haven't caught on by this point. They have a bunch of really weird attributes. Every member of Candoia is noted for their kind of unusual triangular shaped head, and every single one is different. The viper boa, again being the most famous, has one that looks very much like a type of adder used for mimicry as defense, as well as it adds in how they ambush hunt that big head, makes it so they can grab terrestrial prey a little better. The Fiji island boa, bibroni, whatever, has one that looks very unusual. It's triangular, just like all of the other Candoia species, but they have a natural little hump in it. It looks very unusual. And after working with a couple of them individually and noted by other people who have kept them, they seem to use it in a weird way of locomotion where they'll actually take their heads and not really hook it, but kind of lean on it and almost pull their body along, whether climbing through branches, through trees, or people if you're handling them. One of the other common names that you may have heard me mention when I rattled them off was the keeled scaled boa. They in fact do have relatively small but still keeled scales, which is pretty unusual for boas. Really cool. They're also highly variable. So in addition to all the weird shaped heads and funky scales, they come in a wide variety of color and morphs. They can be mottled, they can be striped, they can even almost be entirely patternless, and then come in all sorts of colors of black, browns, whites, yellows, reds, pinks, even green, in all different color combos. Typically, you usually see them in more of a darker phase and more of a lighter phase, but in those two color phases, there's a lot of variability in them. Really cool. Being in all these different Polynesian islands, they're typically found at relatively low elevations in the wild, basically from sea level to almost a foot, almost a mile high. So Denver, 5,280, 5,280 feet up, which kind of seems like a lot for some people, but you also have to keep in mind Other reptile species, even other arboreals like green tree pythons found in their same range, even sharing some of the islands, are found at much higher elevations. So a pretty lowland type of snake as well. In the wild, they're generally considered more of a generalist when it comes to their prey preferences. They've been known to feed on birds, both ground nesting and arboreal, or tree nesting, arboreal. Rodents, amphibians, lizards, and most documented when it comes to actually predation events are bats. So typically we're thinking of that, nocturnal to crepuscular type periods of activity where they're coming out, getting a little bit of warmth from the sun, that residual heat as bats are leaving their tree nests or cave entrances. They're snagging them as they are coming or as they're going back in. Pretty cool. If you want to have one as a captive, they're actually a pretty docile species of snake. I worked with a couple of the individuals in the video here, the smaller one obviously being the male, that I was, kind of poking and prodding them. The owners were also kind of poking and prodding just to kind of show off, because someone was actually going to get one of them while I was there in the store, and he was perfectly content with it, very docile, very reluctant to bite. The female obviously had a bit of a bad shed, I woke her up to do the video, and the only time she ever wanted to try to strike was she had a little bit of stuck shed like on her eye that I was going to see if I was going to be able to actually just kind of pop off, but she wasn't really having that. But again, that was messing with her face, so can't really get mad at her for that one. And when it comes to actual the care and the husbandry, they're typically not really that bad as far as arboreals go. The biggest thing you have to worry about is kind of the same thing that you have to deal with any wild caught species. These guys being primarily wild caught or captive born, i.e. they pop out from a gravid female that they pulled from either a farm or from the wild, and the babies were born and you were able to get them going on food. And so captive born, so you have to deal with kind of parasites and all that other jazz, as well as the husbandry issue that a lot of more coming into the hobby or into this type of arboreal type of snake has to deal with, and that is the humidity and temperature levels. They don't need incredibly high temps, but they do benefit from UVA, UVB light, as well as higher levels of humidity. And for people who aren't quite used to it or ready into that yet, those higher type of vertical enclosures for those arboreal species of snake, they can sometimes have a little bit more of a difficult time getting the humidity in there. And so beyond that, they're pretty easy. Being generalists, they typically are a little bit easier to get started on our essentially raised mice and even onto frozen. These both were on frozen as well. That's really handy when it comes to these type of wild-caught animals, because a lot of times, especially with the Asian species, not only of Candoia, but some of the Elafe and other of those type of animals, they have a hard time switching over to our American mice and rats. These guys typically do pretty well. So if this is something that you'd be really interested in, it's definitely one that is more unusual, that you're probably going to have to go to a show or go to a specialty shop like Beasties, or online maybe via Morph Market, which I believe Beasties also does. I know they have a Morph Market, but I don't know how often they're actually updating it as well. So if you want to check them out on Morph Market, if you're not in Colorado, wink wink, nudge nudge. But they are a really cool and interesting species that's a little bit more unusual to find, but in general, probably a much easier species to keep, at least as far as arboreals go, than say an emerald, an Amazon, or even a green tree python. Very cool species of snake. Really amazing and cool. Hopefully you guys liked today's video, and I'm sure you probably got sick of me hearing me say the word cool a bunch, but honestly, they're really starting to grow on me. It makes me honestly want to, hopefully grab this pair of them. The male especially was really cool. I absolutely love these guys. So, hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you want to, again, check out the whole species spotlight playlist, there's over 70 of them on there. If you want to let me know about any other video topics, any other species you want me to cover, please let me know down below in the comments. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell notification. We are coming up on almost 5,000 subs, which I know isn't a whole lot for YouTube, but once we hit that, we will be doing a full property tour. So this full building, because I've only ever shown off parts and bits, as well as a lot of the outdoor stuff, including some of the more feathery dinosaurs that we recently highlighted in another video. So again, please share with your friends. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Thank you again so much. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll check you next time.